The Duke's daughter called her
My
Mummy,
mummy.
and it shattered the world Gabriel Sinclair had built. The words hit Gabriel like a cold wave. His daughter, lost in grief for so long, had found the comfort she needed in Eliza. But with that simple term of endearment, Gabriel was forced to confront what he'd buried deep inside. His daughter's innocent love for her governess was beginning to tear apart the walls he'd spent years constructing. Could Gabriel love again? Or would he destroy everything to protect his heart from the vulnerability Eliza had unknowingly brought with her? Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying this historic romantic tale, I'd be so grateful for a like or a subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories of love, longing, and history. And if you're up for it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every note, and it always brings a smile to my face. Chapter 1. The Woman Who Would Not Love. The autumn sunlight slanted through the tall windows of the Ashford village schoolhouse, illuminating dust motes that danced above the heads of 12 young girls bent over their slates. Eliza Thornton moved between the rows with quiet efficiency, her dark blue dress rustling softly against the wooden floor, her posture straight as a birch tree. "Very good, Mary," she said, pausing beside a girl of perhaps 10 years. "Your penmanship has improved considerably. Remember to keep your letters consistent in height." The child beamed up at her, and Eliza allowed herself a small smile in return, warm enough to encourage, restrained enough to maintain proper distance. It was a balance she had perfected over the 5 years since she'd taken over her mother's position at the school. "Miss Thornton?" A smaller girl near the front raised her hand tentatively. "May I read my composition aloud?" "Of course, Emma. Class, please give Emma your attention." As the girl began to read a charming, if somewhat rambling essay about her family's cat, Eliza folded her hands at her waist and listened with genuine interest. This, she had learned, was the secret to good teaching: caring deeply about the work while maintaining a certain reserve about the students themselves. One must not become too attached. Children grew up and left. They moved on to marriages, households of their own, lives that had no place for a village schoolmistress. It was better this way, safer. The afternoon lessons concluded at 3 o'clock, and Eliza dismissed her students with reminders about their assignments for the following day. She watched them file out in pairs and small groups, chattering like sparrows, their voices fading as they scattered toward their various homes in the village. "They adore you, you know." Eliza turned to find Miss Sarah Hartley leaning against the door frame between their 2 classrooms, arms crossed, a knowing smile playing at her lips. Sarah taught the younger children, the 6- and 7-year-olds who still struggled with their letters, and had been Eliza's closest friend since they were students in this very building. "They respect me," Eliza corrected, gathering the slates from the desks. "That's quite different from adoration." "Is it?" Sarah moved into the room, collecting chalk and wiping down the blackboard with practiced efficiency. "I saw little Emma's face when you praised her composition. That child would walk through fire for you." "Don't be dramatic, Sarah." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being observant." Sarah set down the chalk and dusted off her hands, regarding Eliza with an expression that was equal parts affection and exasperation. "You're an excellent teacher, Eliza. But sometimes I wonder if you realize how much your students love you, and how little you allow yourself to love them back." Eliza stiffened, her hands stilling on the slate she'd been cleaning. "I care for them deeply, but they're not mine to love, Sarah. In a few years, they'll leave this schoolhouse and barely remember my name." "That's not true, and you know it." But Eliza didn't answer. She simply continued her methodical cleaning, stacking the slates in neat rows, aligning the edges with precision, order, control. These were the things that mattered. Sarah sighed, recognizing the familiar wall of resistance. "Come, let's have tea at my cottage. I've just received a parcel from my sister. She sent the most marvelous shortbread." Despite herself, Eliza felt her lips curve upward. "You know I can't resist your sister's shortbread. I'm counting on it." Sarah's cottage sat just beyond the village green, a tidy stone structure with cheerful yellow curtains in the windows. They settled into the small sitting room, where a fire crackled welcomingly in the hearth, and Sarah busied herself preparing tea, while Eliza arranged herself in the worn armchair that had become hers over countless similar afternoons. "So," Sarah said, returning with a laden tray, "have you heard the news about the Duke?" "Which Duke?" Eliza accepted her teacup, breathing in the fragrant steam. "Our Duke, the Duke of Ashford." Sarah settled into her own chair, her eyes bright with the particular gleam that always preceded interesting gossip. "He's seeking a private tutor for his daughter. A governess, really, though the posting calls for someone with proper teaching credentials." Eliza sipped her tea, feigning disinterest even as curiosity stirred within her. "I see. The pay would be extraordinary, Eliza. £50 per annum, plus room and board at the manor. You could finally have real security." "Security, perhaps." Eliza set down her cup with deliberate care. "But at what cost? Living in a grand house, surrounded by a world that will never truly accept me? Being neither family nor servant? Existing in that strange liminal space that governesses occupy? You'd be teaching a child who likely needs you far more than your current students do. And you'd be free from worrying about how to pay for firewood, or whether your roof will hold through another winter." These were fair points, and Eliza knew it. Her cottage, her mother's cottage, really, was drafty and damp, and her salary barely stretched to cover necessities. Last winter, she'd burned most of her mother's old furniture just to stay warm. But still. "The Duke of Ashford is a widower," she said quietly. 3 years, I believe. They say he's quite devoted to his daughter. They also say he's impossibly remote, that the child is being raised more by servants than by him, despite his devotion." Sarah leaned forward. "Eliza, think of what you could offer that little girl. Think of the difference you could make." Eliza's fingers tightened around her teacup. "Why are you so insistent about this?" Sarah's expression softened. "Because you've built walls so high, my dear friend, that not even affection can scale them. You live in that cottage alone. You teach your students with competence but careful distance. And when you're not working, you're reading books about other people's lives instead of living your own. Is that truly living?" The word struck deeper than Eliza cared to admit. She looked away, focusing on the fire, watching the flames consume the logs with steady inevitability. "My mother warned me," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "About love, about attachment, about giving your heart to anything you might lose." "I know she did. But Eliza, she loved a gentleman once." The words came unbidden, carried on the tide of memory. "Before I was born. He was the son of the local magistrate, handsome, charming, full of promises. He told her he'd marry her. He told her she'd be a lady, that her life would be transformed." Sarah said nothing, simply waited. She'd heard parts of this story before, but never quite like this. "He left her," Eliza continued, staring into the fire as though seeing her mother's face in the flames. The moment he discovered she was carrying his child, he disappeared. Married someone of appropriate rank within 6 months. Left my mother with nothing but shame and me. She turned back to Sarah, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I watched her die in that cottage, Sarah. Watched consumption take her inch by inch. And do you know what she said at the end? Love is a luxury women like us cannot afford. Oh, Eliza. She wasn't wrong. Eliza straightened her shoulders, composing herself with visible effort. I've built a good life, a safe life. I have purpose in my teaching, companionship in your friendship, contentment in my books, and my routine. Why should I risk all of that to enter a world where I'll never truly belong? Because contentment isn't the same as happiness, Sarah said gently. And safety isn't the same as truly living. Before Eliza could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Sarah rose to answer it, returning moments later with a cream-colored envelope bearing an elaborate wax seal. It's for you, she said, extending it toward Eliza. The Duke's crest. Eliza's heart performed an odd little skip. With trembling fingers, why were they trembling? She broke the seal and unfolded the heavy paper within. The letter was brief and formal, written in an elegant, masculine hand. Miss Eliza Thornton, it has come to my attention that you are the daughter of the late Mrs. Catherine Thornton, whose reputation as an educator was well regarded throughout Yorkshire. Your own credentials as her successor have been similarly praised. I find myself in need of a private tutor for my daughter, Lady Lily Sinclair, aged 8 years. Should you be interested in this position, I would request an interview at Ashford Manor at your earliest convenience. Please send word of your availability. Gabriel Sinclair, Duke of Ashford. Eliza read it twice, then a third time, trying to decipher some hidden meaning in the straightforward words. There was none. It was a simple professional inquiry. So why did her hands continue to tremble? Well? Sarah's voice held barely suppressed excitement. What does it say? He requests an interview. Eliza refolded the letter with meticulous care. He mentions my mother, says her reputation was well regarded. Of course it was. Catherine Thornton was the finest teacher this village ever had. And you're her equal, Eliza. Perhaps even her better. Don't be absurd. I'm not. You have her gift for instruction, but you also have something she sometimes lacked. Patience with the slower students. You never make them feel lesser. Eliza stood, moving to the window to watch the late afternoon light paint the village in shades of amber and gold. Ashford was a good place, a safe place. She knew every cobblestone, every cottage, every face. It was small and circumscribed, but it was hers. The Duke's manor sat on the hill beyond the village, visible from here only as a distant suggestion of chimneys and roofline. It might as well have been another country. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly. Sarah joined her at the window, slipping an arm through hers. Then don't think of it as entering a new world. Think of it as an interview, just a conversation. You don't have to accept the position if it doesn't feel right. And if it does feel right, what then? Then perhaps you'll discover that walls, no matter how carefully constructed, aren't the same as foundations. Perhaps you'll find that the life you've been protecting isn't the life you actually want. Eliza leaned her head briefly against her friend's shoulder, drawing comfort from the familiar warmth. You're determined to push me out of my nest, aren't you? Not push, encourage. There's a difference. Sarah squeezed her arm. At least consider it, Eliza. What's the harm in one interview? What indeed? That evening, in her small cottage, Eliza sat at her mother's old writing desk and composed a reply to the Duke. The fire had burned low, and she wrote by candlelight, choosing each word with care. Your Grace, I am honored by your inquiry and would be pleased to meet with you to discuss the position. I am available at your convenience. Respectfully, Miss Eliza Thornton. She signed her name with a steady hand, though her heart beat an unsteady rhythm against her ribs. It was just an interview, she told herself. Just a conversation. She wasn't committing to anything. But as she sealed the letter and set it aside to be posted in the morning, her gaze fell on the small portrait that hung above the desk. Her mother, painted in better days, before illness and hardship had carved lines into her face. I'm only considering it, Mama, she whispered to the painted image. I won't be foolish. I won't let myself care too much. I'll keep my heart safe, just as you taught me. The portrait, naturally, offered no response. But in the flickering candlelight, her mother's painted eyes seemed almost sad, as though mourning not what her daughter might do, but what she might never allow herself to become. Eliza turned away, banking the fire and preparing for bed with her usual efficiency. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes and moaning through the eaves. Autumn was deepening toward winter. And soon the cold would set in properly. In her narrow bed, wrapped in her mother's quilts, Eliza tried to sleep. But her mind kept returning to the Duke's letter, to his elegant handwriting, to the words, at your earliest convenience. Her hands had trembled when she'd broken that seal. They trembled still. And though she'd built walls high and strong around her heart, though she'd convinced herself that safety and solitude were sufficient, some small, stubborn part of her, the part that still remembered what it felt like to hope, whispered that perhaps, just perhaps, Sarah was right. Perhaps there was a difference between existing and truly living. Perhaps it was time to find out which one she'd been doing. Chapter 2. The Duke who could not feel Ashford Manor rose from the Yorkshire hillside like something from a fever dream, all grey stone and mullioned windows, its towers and chimneys reaching toward a pewter sky that threatened rain. Eliza stood at the base of the sweeping drive, her small valise clutched in both hands, and felt every inch of distance between her modest cottage and this imposing edifice. She had told herself it was merely an interview, that she need not commit to anything. But standing here, the manor looming before her like a judgment, she understood with sudden clarity that some decisions were made the moment one set foot on a particular path. Coming here was itself a choice, regardless of what followed. Miss Thornton? Eliza turned to find a woman approaching from the side entrance, a dignified figure in her 60s, dressed in the black bombazine that marked her as upper staff. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe knot, but her eyes, when they met Eliza's, held unexpected warmth. I'm Mrs. Pemberton, the housekeeper. His Grace is expecting you. Please, come with me. Eliza followed her through a servant's entrance and into a world of polished marble and gleaming wood. The manor's interior was as imposing as its exterior, all soaring ceilings and ancestral portraits, everything speaking of wealth and lineage stretching back centuries. Her footsteps echoed on the stone floors despite her attempts at quiet. The manor has 63 rooms, Mrs. Pemberton said as they walked, her voice carrying the particular neutrality of a servant discussing her employer's domain. Though we keep only the main wings open now. Since the late Duchess passed, she paused, choosing her words carefully, His Grace has been changed. Little Lady Lily suffers most, poor lamb. How long has it been? Eliza asked softly. 3 years this past spring. Lady Arabella took ill quite suddenly. A fever that wouldn't break. She was gone within a fortnight. Mrs. Pemberton's voice carried the weight of genuine grief. She was sunshine itself, Miss Thornton. Laughed through these halls like music. Now, she gestured at the silent, austere corridors, now we exist in perpetual winter. They passed through what Mrs. Pemberton identified as the portrait gallery, and Eliza found herself slowing before a particular painting. The woman depicted was perhaps 30, beautiful in a way that transcended mere prettiness. All golden hair and warm brown eyes, captured mid-laugh, as though the painter had caught her in a moment of pure joy. "That's her," Mrs. Pemberton said unnecessarily, "the late Duchess. His Grace had it painted the year before she died. Sometimes I find him standing here, just staring at it." Eliza studied the portrait, feeling an unexpected pang of something that might have been sympathy or envy, or perhaps both. This woman had been loved absolutely, had filled these halls with light and laughter. What must it be like, Eliza wondered, to be mourned so completely? "Come," Mrs. Pemberton said gently, "His Grace doesn't like to be kept waiting." The Duke's study was a masculine sanctuary of leather and mahogany, its walls lined with books that actually appeared to have been read. A fire crackled in the hearth, and through the tall windows, Eliza could see what must once have been an elaborate garden, now overgrown and wild, autumn having claimed it. "Miss Thornton, Your Grace." The man who rose from behind the massive desk was not what Eliza had expected. She'd imagined someone older, perhaps softened by grief. Instead, Gabriel Sinclair, Duke of Ashford, was perhaps 35, tall and austere, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and eyes the color of winter storms. His face was all sharp angles and controlled emotion, handsome in the way a cliff face is handsome, beautiful but forbidding. "Miss Thornton," his voice matched his appearance, deep, formal, carefully modulated. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Eliza settled into the chair he indicated, arranging her skirts with hands that were steadier than she'd anticipated. Mrs. Pemberton withdrew, just closing the door with a soft click that seemed unnaturally loud. "I'll be direct," the Duke said, returning to his own chair but not relaxing into it. "I find myself in need of a governess for my daughter. This is not a position I fill lightly. Lily has had 4 governesses in the past 3 years. 4? Eliza kept her voice neutral. "That seems frequent." "Indeed." A muscle tightened in his jaw. "The first 2 attempted to position themselves as potential replacements for the late Duchess. I dismissed them immediately. The third was competent, but harsh with Lily. The fourth—" He paused. "The fourth found the atmosphere here too melancholy and departed of her own accord." Eliza studied him carefully. Beneath the formal control, she detected exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been holding himself together through sheer force of will for far too long. "I see," she said. "And what is it you seek in the 5th candidate, Your Grace?" "Competence, kindness, someone who won't attempt to manipulate either myself or my daughter." He fixed her with those storm-gray eyes. "I've read your letters of reference, Miss Thornton. They speak highly of your teaching abilities, but I need to know, can you provide my daughter with the warmth she needs while maintaining appropriate boundaries?" It was a fair question, if oddly phrased. Eliza chose her words carefully. "I can offer your daughter education, structure, and fairness," she said. "I will treat her with respect and genuine care. But if you seek charm and social graces befitting a duke's daughter, the sort of polish that will prepare her for court presentations and society balls, you'd do better to look elsewhere. I'm a schoolmistress's daughter, Your Grace. I can teach her Latin and mathematics, literature and history. I can teach her to think clearly and express herself well. But I cannot teach her to be something I am not. She expected dismissal. Instead, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or possibly respect. You don't simper or flatter, Miss Thornton. That's refreshing. I have neither the skill nor the inclination for artifice, Your Grace. Good. He leaned back slightly, his posture easing by perhaps half an inch. Lily has seen enough artifice. She needs genuineness. A knock interrupted them. At the Duke's invitation, Mrs. Pemberton entered, followed by a small figure who seemed to be trying to make herself invisible. Lady Lily Sinclair was 8 years old and heartbreakingly lovely, all golden curls and enormous eyes that were the exact shade of her mother's in the portrait. She wore a beautifully made dress of pale blue, but clutched in her arms was a worn rag doll that had clearly seen better days. "Lily," the Duke said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, "this is Miss Thornton. She may be your new governess." The child's eyes fixed on Eliza with an intensity that seemed too old for her years. "How do you do, Miss Thornton?" she said in a voice barely above a whisper. Eliza leaned forward slightly, bringing herself to the child's eye level. "I'm very well, Lady Lily. Thank you for asking. And how are you?" Lily glanced at her father, then back at Eliza. "I'm well, thank you." But she wasn't well. Eliza could see it in the careful way she held herself, the cautious politeness that children adopted when they'd learned that adults were unpredictable. This was a child who'd lost too much and was protecting what little remained. "That's a lovely doll," Eliza said gently. "Does she have a name?" Lily's arms tightened around the toy. "Margaret. Mama gave her to me." "Then she must be very special indeed." Something shifted in Lily's expression, a crack in the careful composure. "Yes, she is." "Perhaps," Eliza said, "if I come to work here, you might tell me more about Margaret, and you could show me your favorite places in this grand house. I confess, I've never been in a manor before. I'm quite in awe of all the rooms." "There are 63, Lily said, the first spark of animation entering her voice, "though we don't use most of them anymore. But there's a winter garden that Mama loved. It's all overgrown now, but it's still beautiful in a wild sort of way. I should very much like to see it." Lily looked at her father again, seeking permission for something Eliza couldn't quite identify. The Duke gave a small nod, and Lily's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Thank you, Lily," he said. "Mrs. Pemberton will take you back to the nursery now." After they'd gone, silence settled over the study. The Duke rose and moved to the window, staring out at the overgrown garden his daughter had mentioned. "My late wife's mother, Lady Rothwell, visits periodically," he said without turning. "She's very invested in Lily's upbringing. She will wish to meet any governess I employ. She can be," he paused, searching for the right word, "exacting." "I understand, Your Grace." He turned then, studying her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of every detail of her appearance, her simple dress, her unadorned hair, her work-worn hands. "Do you?" he asked. "Do you understand what you'd be entering, Miss Thornton? This is not a cheerful household. We do not entertain. We exist in a state of suspension. Some might call it melancholy. Others might simply call it grief." Eliza met his gaze steadily. "I understand that your daughter needs someone who won't abandon her. someone who will provide stability and care. If you're asking whether I can commit to that despite the atmosphere, then yes, Your Grace, I can. Something passed across his face. Relief, perhaps, or resignation, or some combination of both. "The position is yours if you want it," he said. £50 per annum, room and board included. You'd have Sundays at liberty after morning services. You'd begin immediately. Immediately. No time for second thoughts, no opportunity to retreat to the safety of her cottage and reconsider. Eliza felt her mother's voice echoing in her memory. Love is a luxury women like us cannot afford. But this wasn't love. This was employment. A position. Security. Wasn't it? "I accept," she heard herself say. Mrs. Pemberton showed her to the governess' quarters, a suite of rooms in the family wing, modest but comfortable, with a small sitting room, a bedroom, and a view of the overgrown winter garden. After the housekeeper departed with promises to have Eliza's belongings sent up from the village, Eliza stood at the window and stared at the tangle of dead vines and dormant plants below. 3 years of neglect had transformed what must have been a masterpiece of cultivation into something wild and melancholy. Rather like this house itself, she thought. Rather like the Duke and his daughter. Behind her, in the hallway, she heard voices. Mrs. Pemberton and the Duke, speaking quietly. "What do you think of her?" That was the Duke's voice, lower than it had been in the study, almost uncertain. "That one has a good heart, Your Grace." Mrs. Pemberton's reply carried conviction. "She'll be good for Lady Lily. But," a pause, "but she's wary. Someone hurt her once. She's built walls as high as your own." Eliza pressed her forehead against the cool glass, fighting the urge to flee back to her cottage, to safety, to the small, circumscribed life she understood. "Perhaps," the Duke said so quietly Eliza almost didn't hear, "walls are precisely what's needed. Hers to protect herself, and mine to protect what remains of my family." "Or perhaps, Your Grace," Mrs. Pemberton replied with the particular boldness of long service, "walls are precisely the problem." Their footsteps retreated, leaving Eliza alone with the dying afternoon light and the weight of the choice she'd made. She unpacked her few belongings with methodical precision, her books arranged on the shelf, her mother's shawl folded in the drawer, her teaching materials laid out on the small desk. Everything in its place, everything ordered and controlled. She could do this. She would maintain proper distance, teach the child, collect her salary, and remain untouched by the grief that permeated these walls. She would not become entangled in the emotional wreckage of this household. She would keep her heart safe, just as her mother had taught her. But as darkness fell over Ashford Manor, as the house settled into its evening quiet, Eliza found herself returning to the window, staring down at the winter garden below. Even in its wild state, even choked with weeds and neglect, she could see the ghost of what it had been, could imagine how it must have looked when the late Duchess had tended it, when these halls had rung with laughter instead of echoing with silence. Beauty, once created, left traces even in ruin. It was, Eliza thought with sudden unease, rather like love itself. Chapter 3. The Child Who Needed a Mother. The schoolroom occupied the eastern corner of the second floor, its tall windows admitting the pale November light that seemed perpetually filtered through Yorkshire's autumn clouds. Eliza had arranged it with care, slates and primers on the desk, a globe positioned by the window, a small bookshelf she'd brought from her cottage now holding the texts she deemed essential for an 8-year-old's education. Lady Lily sat across from her, back straight as a ruler, hands folded precisely in her lap. "Shall we begin with geography?" Eliza asked gently. "Yes, Miss Thornton. Whatever you think best, Miss Thornton." "Lily, you needn't seek my approval for every breath you take." "I'm sorry, Miss Thornton. I didn't mean to—" The child stopped herself, biting her lip. Eliza set down the geography text and leaned forward. "Darling, you've apologized 3 times in as many minutes. You've done nothing wrong. In this room, you're permitted to simply be yourself." Lily's eyes widened slightly, as though this concept was entirely foreign. "Yes, Miss Thornton. I'm sorry." She caught herself again, and a ghost of a smile flickered across her face. "I mean, thank you, Miss Thornton." "Better," Eliza said, allowing warmth into her voice. "Now then, geography. Can you show me where we are on this globe?" Over the following days and weeks, a pattern emerged, slow as morning frost melting, but just as inevitable. Lily was extraordinarily intelligent, her mind quick and retentive, but she'd learned to dim her own light, to make herself small and unobtrusive. She answered questions in whispers, as though afraid the sound of her own voice might disturb the house's perpetual quiet. But gradually, carefully, Eliza coaxed her out. "Tell me," she said one afternoon during their literature lesson, "what do you think Jane Eyre should have done when she discovered the truth about Thornfield Hall?" Lily hesitated. I don't know, Miss Thornton. I'm not asking what you know. I'm asking what you think. There's a difference." A pause. Then, tentatively, I think she should have been angry. That he lied to her. Even if he loved her, lying was wrong." "Yes," Eliza said, pleasure warming her voice. "Exactly. You see, you have thoughts, Lily. Good ones. Don't be afraid to share them." The child's face transformed, a sunrise breaking through clouds. It was during their 3rd week that Eliza discovered where Lily disappeared to during their afternoon breaks. Following a hunch, she made her way down the back stairs and through the servants' corridor, emerging into what must once have been the manor's pride, the winter garden. 3 years of neglect had transformed it into something both beautiful and heartbreaking. Dead vines choked what had once been carefully trained roses. Frost-blackened perennials drooped over pathways now thick with weeds. But here and there, stubborn life persisted. A patch of late-blooming chrysanthemums, a hardy lavender bush still fragrant despite the cold. And there, in the center of it all, was Lily. The child knelt beside an overgrown bed, her good dress already stained with dirt, struggling to pull weeds from around what appeared to be a dormant rose bush. Her small hands worked with determination but little knowledge, and as Eliza watched, she uprooted what looked suspiciously like a perennial rather than a weed. "Lily?" The child startled, spinning around with guilt written across her face. "I'm sorry, Miss Thornton. I know I should have asked permission, but—" "No apologies needed." Eliza moved closer, kneeling beside her despite her own skirts. "This was your mama's garden?" "Yes." Lily's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "She loved it here. She used to bring me with her every day, and she'd tell me the names of all the flowers. I remember some of them, but not all. And I thought—" She looked down at her dirt-stained hands. "I thought if I could make it beautiful again, maybe Papa wouldn't look so sad when he sees it from his window." Eliza's throat tightened. "That's a lovely thought, darling, but I think you might be fighting a battle too large for one small girl." "I know." Lily's shoulders slumped. "I don't really know what I'm doing. but I have to try. It's all I have left of her." Eliza was quiet for a moment, remembering her own mother, remembering the desperate need to hold on to anything that kept memory alive. "Shall we learn together?" she said finally. "I'm no expert gardener, but I think your mama would be happy to see someone caring for her flowers. We could come here twice a week. Make it part of our natural history lessons." Lily's face blazed with hope. "Truly? Truly. We'll need to wait until spring for most of the work, but we can start clearing the debris now, marking which plants might survive. And I'll write to a friend in the village who knows about gardens. Between the three of us, we might just manage it." "Oh, Miss Thornton!" And then, spontaneously, Lily threw her arms around Eliza's neck. Eliza stiffened for just a moment, her mother's warnings echoing, her carefully constructed walls rising. But then she felt the child's small body shaking against hers, felt the desperate need in that embrace, and something within her simply surrendered. She wrapped her arms around Lily and held her close. "It's all right, darling. We'll make it beautiful again. I promise." Their ritual began the following week. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, after formal lessons concluded, they would bundle into warm cloaks and venture into the winter garden. Armed with gardening gloves Mrs. Pemberton had unearthed from storage, they cleared pathways, cut back dead growth, and made careful notes about what might bloom again come spring. Lily transformed during these sessions, laughing freely, chattering about her memories of the garden in its glory, her reserve melting away like snow in sunlight. It was during their fourth session that disaster struck. Lily had insisted on carrying the watering can herself. "I'm strong enough, Miss Thornton. Truly I am." But the path was slick with frost, and her foot caught on an exposed root. She went down hard, the watering can flying, her knee striking a jagged stone. The wail that followed was pure anguish, not just physical pain, but the accumulated fear and grief of a child who'd learned that falling down could mean losing everything. "Lily!" Eliza was beside her in an instant, gathering the sobbing child into her arms. "Let me see, darling. Let me look." The knee was badly scraped, bleeding through her torn stocking. Not serious, but painful. The kind of injury that hurts more for the shock than the actual damage. "I'm sorry," Lily gasped between sobs. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." "Hush now. You've nothing to apologize for." Eliza pulled out her handkerchief, pressing it gently against the wound. "Accidents happen. You're going to be perfectly fine." But Lily couldn't stop crying, her small body shaking with more than just pain. This was 3 years of unshed tears finding an outlet. Grief and fear and loneliness pouring out over one scraped knee. Eliza did what came naturally, what she'd sworn she wouldn't do, what all her mother's warnings had been meant to prevent. She gathered the child fully into her lap, holding her close, rocking her gently. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice soft and steady, "there was a brave little princess who lived in a castle with gardens that stretched to the horizon." She told a story, improvised and rambling, about a princess who could talk to flowers, who brought a dead garden back to life through kindness and persistence. It was silly and sentimental, nothing like the proper literature she taught, but Lily's sobs gradually quieted as she listened. "And did the flowers bloom again?" Lily asked finally, her voice small against Eliza's shoulder. "Every single one. Because the princess believed in them, and sometimes, darling, that's all growing things need. Someone who believes in them." Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly, Eliza almost didn't hear. "You're like a mama." Eliza's breath caught. I'm sorry, Lily added quickly, pulling back slightly. I shouldn't have said that. I know you're my governess, not my— You needn't apologize for speaking your heart, darling. Eliza's own eyes were suddenly wet. That's one thing you never need to apologize for. Inside the manor, standing at his study window, Gabriel Sinclair watched the scene unfold in the garden below. He'd been reviewing estate accounts when movement had caught his eye, and now he stood frozen, observing his daughter, his reserved, careful daughter, crying in her governess's arms. No, not just crying, being comforted, being held with the kind of tenderness he'd forgotten existed. Something twisted in his chest, part pain, part something else he refused to name. Your Grace? His land steward, Mr. Collins, had entered unnoticed. I have the quarterly reports you requested. Gabriel tore his gaze from the window. Yes, of course. They conducted their business efficiently, but as Collins prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. If I may speak plainly, Your Grace, the staff have been remarking on Miss Thornton's influence with Lady Lily. Quite remarkable, really. The child is different, lighter. Yes, Gabriel said. I've noticed. Though, Collins hesitated again. Some wonder if a governess should be quite so familiar with her charge. Lady Lily has begun calling her, that is, there's concern about appropriate boundaries. Gabriel's voice went cold. Miss Thornton's methods are producing excellent results. That's all that concerns me. You may tell the staff that any further commentary on the matter will be unwelcome. Of course, Your Grace. I meant no offense. After Collins departed, Gabriel returned to the window. Eliza and Lily were making their way back to the house now, Lily limping slightly but smiling, holding tight to her governess's hand. As they passed beneath his window, he heard Lily's voice drift up. Will you tell me another story tonight, Miss Thornton? About the princess and the gardens? Of course, darling. As many as you'd like. That evening, after Lily's dinner, Eliza settled into the chair beside the schoolroom fire with a book of poetry. Lily curled up on the floor at her feet, supposedly working on her penmanship, but mostly just being near. As the fire crackled and the evening deepened, Eliza began to read aloud, not the assigned poetry, but a story she'd loved as a child. Her voice was soft and rhythmic, and she didn't notice when Lily abandoned her writing entirely and leaned against her knee. She only noticed when the small body grew heavy, when the breathing became deep and regular. Lily had fallen asleep against her, completely trusting, completely at peace. Eliza set aside the book, looking down at the child's face. So young, so vulnerable, so desperately in need of exactly what Eliza had sworn never to give. Good night, Mummy, Lily murmured, still half asleep. Eliza froze. The word hung in the air between them, tender and terrible, breaking something open inside her that she'd kept locked for so long. It's Miss Thornton, sweetheart, she whispered. But Lily was already fully asleep, unhearing. Eliza sat motionless, one hand resting gently on Lily's hair, her own eyes filling with tears she hadn't known she was capable of shedding. In the doorway, unnoticed, Mrs. Pemberton stood watching. After a moment, she withdrew silently, making her way to the Duke's study. Your Grace? A word? Gabriel looked up from his papers. What is it, Mrs. Pemberton? The child called her Mummy this evening. Miss Thornton corrected her, of course, but the housekeeper paused. The look on that woman's face, Your Grace, and Lady Lily. I haven't seen her this happy in 3 years. Gabriel's hand stilled on his pen. I see. Do you, Your Grace? Mrs. Pemberton asked gently. Because that child needs a mother. And Miss Thornton, whether she admits it or not, needs someone to love. What I'm wondering is whether you'll have the sense to see what's growing in your own house before you let it slip away. After she'd gone, Gabriel sat alone in his study, the estate accounts forgotten. Finally, he rose and moved to stand before Arabella's portrait, the one that captured her mid-laugh, full of life and light. "Forgive me, my dear," he whispered to the painted image. "I don't know what I'm feeling, but it frightens me. She's bringing Lily back to life, and perhaps she's bringing me back too. Is that betrayal? Or is it simply living?" The portrait offered no answers, only that eternal smile, frozen in time, forever young, forever lost. Outside, winter pressed close against the windows. But in the winter garden below, dormant seeds waited patiently for spring. Chapter 4. The walls begin to crumble. Winter arrived in earnest, transforming Ashford Manor into something from a fairy tale, all frost-etched windows and snow-laden gardens. 6 weeks had passed since Eliza's arrival, and the house had begun to feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home, though she couldn't quite say when the transformation had occurred. Perhaps it was the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through the corridors. Perhaps it was the way Mrs. Pemberton now hummed while she worked. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. Something Eliza was afraid to examine too closely. She noticed the Duke's presence first as a curiosity, then as a pattern. He would appear in the schoolroom doorway during afternoon lessons, ostensibly to observe Lily's progress. He would join them for tea in the nursery, listening to Lily's excited chatter about Latin declensions and Greek myths. He would walk through the winter garden while they worked, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as they cleared another bed or marked another potentially salvageable plant. "You've made remarkable progress," he said one late afternoon, surveying the garden with something almost like wonder. The beds were cleared now, pathways visible, the bones of the original design emerging from years of neglect. Lily beamed. "Miss Thornton says we're archaeologists, uncovering hidden treasures. Look, Papa, we found Mama's lavender. It's still alive underneath all the dead bits." Gabriel crouched beside the plant his daughter indicated, touching the gray-green leaves with careful fingers. When he looked up at Eliza, his expression was unguarded for once, raw with something between gratitude and grief. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for bringing life back to this place. Arabella she would have been grateful." "It's Lily's doing as much as mine," Eliza replied, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. She remembered where everything was planted. Still, he stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "You gave her permission to remember with joy instead of only sorrow. That's no small gift." Lily, oblivious to the undercurrents, had already moved on to another discovery. "Papa, come see. We think this might be Mama's roses." As the child scampered ahead, Gabriel fell into step beside Eliza. "She's different," he said. "Lighter, more herself, I think, than she's been since—" He stopped. "Since her mother died," Eliza finished gently. "You needn't avoid speaking of her, Your Grace. The Duchess was real. She mattered. Pretending otherwise helps no one." He glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. "You're very direct, Miss Thornton. I find that grief and euphemism make poor companions." "Yes," he said slowly. "Yes, I suppose they do." Their conversations began to extend beyond the professional. He would linger after checking on Lily's lessons, and they would discuss pedagogy, which somehow led to philosophy. which spiraled into debates about education and society and the nature of knowledge itself. Plato argues that education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel, Eliza said one evening, standing before the schoolroom bookshelf in search of a particular text. But Aristotle would counter that without filling the vessel first. Without foundational knowledge, there's nothing to kindle, Gabriel replied from his position by the fire. Lily had gone to the nursery for supper, but somehow he'd remained. And somehow Eliza hadn't suggested he leave. Ah, but Aristotle also believed in practical wisdom, phronesis, which can only be developed through experience, not mere instruction. Are you suggesting I should let Lily learn mathematics by trial and error? That seems inefficient. Eliza turned, a smile playing at her lips. I'm suggesting that perhaps both men had pieces of truth, that education requires both knowledge and experience, both structure and freedom. Gabriel leaned forward, his eyes bright with the particular intensity of intellectual engagement. But surely there's a hierarchy. Surely some knowledge must precede experience. Must it? A child learns to walk through experience, not instruction. They learn language the same way. Perhaps formal education has it backward. Perhaps we should kindle first and fill later. That's revolutionary thinking, Miss Thornton. Is it? Or is it simply honest observation? They argued for 20 minutes, neither giving ground, both clearly relishing the debate. When Eliza finally glanced at the clock and realized how late it had grown, she felt almost breathless, not from exertion, but from the sudden realization that she felt intellectually alive, in a way she hadn't since her mother's death. And judging by the expression on the Duke's face, he felt the same. She began. Yes, he said quickly, standing. Of course. Forgive me for keeping you. But neither of them moved toward the door. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, delivered by special courier. Eliza was with Lily in the library when Mrs. Pemberton brought it to the Duke, and she couldn't help but notice the way his expression tightened as he read. Your Grace? She ventured. Is something wrong? He looked up, seeming surprised to find them there. Lady Rothwell, my late wife's mother. She's coming to visit next month. She wishes to assess Lily's progress and meet her new governess. The way he said it suggested this was not entirely welcome news. I see, Eliza said carefully. Lady Rothwell can be. He paused, choosing words with visible care. Exacting. She has very specific ideas about what's appropriate for Lily, for the household in general. I understand, Your Grace. But she didn't. Not really. Not until Mrs. Pemberton explained later, in the privacy of the housekeeper's sitting room, that Lady Rothwell had been the one to dismiss the previous two governesses, had in fact accused them of inappropriate familiarity with the Duke. She's protective of Lady Arabella's memory, Mrs. Pemberton said carefully. Sometimes, perhaps too much so. Eliza felt something cold settle in her stomach. Inappropriate familiarity. Was that what was happening? These conversations, these debates, this growing comfort in the Duke's presence. Was it crossing lines she hadn't realized existed? I'll be sure to maintain proper professionalism, she said. Mrs. Pemberton gave her a long look. Of course, Miss Thornton, I'm sure you will. The village dinner party was announced a week later, an annual tradition apparently, hosted by the local squire. The Duke was expected to attend, as were all the eligible ladies of the county. You should go, Your Grace, Mrs. Pemberton urged. The village needs to see you engaging with society again. Eliza stayed with Lily, of course. Governesses did not attend dinner parties with dukes, but as she helped the child prepare for bed, Lily asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. Why can't you come to dinner, Miss Thornton? You're part of our family now. You should be there like a real mummy would." Eliza sat on the edge of Lily's bed, choosing her words carefully. "I'm your teacher, sweetheart. Your father is a duke. The world has rules about such things, about where different people belong." "But that's silly." "Yes, darling." Eliza smoothed the child's hair gently. "Sometimes they are, but they're still the rules." "When I'm grown," Lily said with the fierce certainty of childhood, "I'm going to change all the silly rules." After Lily slept, Eliza found herself drawn to the family drawing room rather than her own quarters. It was warmer there, and she told herself she simply wanted to finish her book by a better fire. That it had nothing to do with the fact that the Duke would pass this way when he returned. She was deep in her reading when the clock struck 11, and she nearly jumped when his voice came from the doorway. "You're still awake." Gabriel stood there in his evening clothes, looking exhausted and vaguely irritated. "I hope you don't mind," Eliza said, starting to rise. "I know I shouldn't be. Please, stay." He moved into the room, loosening his cravat with visible relief. "That was possibly the longest evening of my life." "Was it so terrible?" Lady Ashworth spent 2 hours detailing the latest London fashions. Mrs. Pennington felt compelled to share every illness her grandchildren have suffered this year. And the squire insisted on discussing hunting, about which I care nothing. He dropped into the chair across from her with none of his usual formality. Is this what society is? This endless parade of trivial conversation? Despite herself, Eliza smiled. "I wouldn't know, Your Grace. I've never been invited." "You're lucky." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its careful arrangement. "I spent the entire evening wishing I was here, wishing I was talking about something that mattered, with someone who—" He stopped. "Someone who what?" Eliza asked softly. "Someone who challenges me. Who makes me think. Who treats me like a person rather than a title." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. "Arabella was like that," he said finally, his voice dropping. "She never let me hide behind being the Duke. She was sunshine. When she died, I thought I'd died too. I've been dormant these 3 years. Grief can be a kind of cold," Eliza said. "We wrap it around ourselves like armor. It protects us, but it also freezes us in place." Gabriel looked at her with sudden intensity. "Yes, exactly that. How do you understand so well?" "Because I've been frozen too, Your Grace. Just in a different way." The conversation shifted, deepening, becoming the kind of talk that only happens late at night when guards are down and truth feels safer in darkness. They spoke of loss and duty and the weights they carried, his of title and expectation, hers of her mother's warnings and the walls she'd built against feeling too much. The fire burned low, the clock chimed midnight, and still they talked, leaning forward in their chairs, the space between them charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Finally, Gabriel moved, not dramatically, simply shifting from his chair to sit beside her on the settee, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, see the silver threading his dark hair. "Eliza," he said, and her name in his voice was a revelation. He reached toward her hand, and suddenly her mother's voice filled her head, sharp and warning. "He promised me the world, then left me with nothing but you and shame. I should—" Eliza stood abruptly, nearly stumbling. "Lily, I should check on Lily. It's past midnight, she'll be sleeping. Still, I should— I'm sorry." Good night, Your Grace. She fled, not quite running, but close, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she heard him call her name, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. In her room, door closed and locked, Eliza paced like a caged thing. Her hands shook, her breath came too fast. She was falling in love with Gabriel Sinclair. Worse, she suspected he might feel the same. This was exactly what her mother had warned her about. Loving a man whose world she could never truly enter. Setting herself up for heartbreak and shame. She was a schoolmaster's daughter, and he was a duke. There was no future here. There couldn't be. And yet when he'd looked at her tonight, when he'd said her name, when he'd reached for her hand, she'd wanted nothing more than to take it. To let herself believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the rules could be different. But rules were never different for women like her. She pressed her forehead against the cold window glass and forced herself to breathe. Tomorrow, she would rebuild her walls. Tomorrow, she would remember her place. Tomorrow, she would be only what she was supposed to be. Lily's governess, nothing more. But tonight, alone in the darkness, she let herself acknowledge the truth. She was in love with a man she could never have, and she had no idea how to protect herself from the devastation that was surely coming. Chapter 5. Love in Disguise. Winter transformed Ashford Manor into something magical. Holly and ivy wound around the banisters, candles glowed in every window. And for the first time in 3 years, Christmas preparations filled the house with purpose and warmth. Lily threw herself into the festivities with abandon, insisting on decorating every available surface while Eliza supervised with amused indulgence. "More greenery, Mummy," Lily called from her precarious perch on a footstool. "This corner looks bare." Eliza no longer corrected the word. It had slipped so naturally into Lily's vocabulary, appearing with increasing frequency, and each time Eliza opened her mouth to gently redirect, she found the correction dying on her lips. What harm could it do, really? It made the child happy. And if Gabriel noticed, and he surely did, he said nothing. Simply watched with an expression Eliza couldn't quite read. The days accumulated like snowfall, each small moment building upon the last, until the landscape of their lives had been transformed without any of them quite noticing when the change occurred. Gabriel teaching Lily to ride her pony in the manor's paddock. Eliza watching from the fence rail wrapped in a warm cloak, her breath misting in the cold air. "Heels down, darling," she called, and Lily adjusted her posture, beaming with pride when her father praised her improved seat. Family dinners in the small dining room rather than the cavernous formal space, the three of them gathered at one end of the table while conversation flowed easily. Lily's chatter about her lessons, Gabriel's dry observations about estate matters, Eliza's occasional witty interjection that made them both laugh. "What do you think, Miss Thornton?" Gabriel asked one evening, setting down his wineglass. "The tenant farmers are proposing a cooperative system for purchasing equipment. Does that seem sound to you?" Eliza blinked, surprised to be consulted. I think it's quite sensible, actually. Pooling resources benefits everyone, and it builds community." "That's what I thought. You have good instincts." He said it casually, but his eyes held warmth. Lily's piano recital in the music room, the child's small fingers stumbling only slightly through a Mozart piece she'd been practicing for weeks. When she finished, both Gabriel and Eliza applauded enthusiastically, and Lily's face blazed with joy. "Did you like it, Mummy? Papa?" "It was beautiful, darling," Eliza said, throat tight. "Your best performance yet," Gabriel added, and Lily flew to embrace them both. These moments wove together into something that felt dangerously like family, and Eliza found her carefully constructed walls crumbling one small breach at a time. "You're different," Sarah said, the moment Eliza arrived for their weekly tea. It was her afternoon off, and she'd walked to the village despite the cold, needing the familiar comfort of her oldest friend. Different how? Eliza unwound her scarf, avoiding Sarah's too knowing gaze. Lighter, somehow. But also, Sarah poured tea with careful precision. Troubled. Those two things don't usually exist together. Eliza accepted the cup, staring into the amber liquid as though it might contain answers. "I'm afraid I've done something foolish, Sarah. Tell me." "I've allowed myself to care too deeply. For the child, certainly. But also—" She couldn't finish. "For the Duke?" The words hung between them. Eliza set down her cup with trembling hands. "It's madness. He's a duke. I'm a schoolmaster's daughter. Even if he felt anything, which he surely doesn't, it could never be." "Are you certain he doesn't feel anything?" "Sarah, I'm asking sincerely, Eliza, because from what you've described, the family dinners, the consultations, the way he looks at you, it sounds like a man who's feeling a great deal." "That's exactly the problem." Eliza stood, pacing to the window. "Even if there were feelings, on both sides, what future could there possibly be? The gossip alone would destroy him socially. And me? I'd be ruined entirely. Women like me don't love men like him and walk away unscathed. So you're protecting your heart by deciding it's impossible before you even know if it's real? That's what sensible women do, Sarah. We don't reach for stars we can never touch." Sarah joined her at the window, slipping an arm through hers. "And if the star is reaching back, what then?" Eliza had no answer. The village Christmas fair was an annual tradition. Stalls selling roasted chestnuts and mulled cider, children playing in the snow, the whole community gathering in the square for an evening of celebration. Eliza had assumed she'd remain at the manor with Lily, while the Duke made his obligatory appearance. Instead, Gabriel insisted they all attend together. "Lily would be heartbroken to miss it," he said when Eliza protested. "And she'll need both of us to supervise her properly." So Eliza found herself walking through the village square at dusk, Lily between them holding both their hands, looking for all the world like a family. The local gentry noticed. Of course, they noticed. Eliza saw the raised eyebrows, the whispered conversations behind gloved hands. Mrs. Pemberton, accompanying them with several other household staff, overheard two ladies near the ribbon competition booth. "Look at the Duke with that governess. Quite taken with her, isn't he? How inappropriate. Poor Lady Rothwell must be mortified when she hears." The housekeeper said nothing, but her eyes met Eliza's across the crowd, and the warning was clear. The ribbon competition was a silly village tradition, men competing in tests of strength and skill. Winners receiving elaborately embroidered ribbons from the ladies' auxiliary. Gabriel participated only because Lily begged him to, and he won easily, accepting a beautiful blue silk ribbon with polite grace. "Give it to Mummy," Lily insisted, tugging his arm. "She should have it. She's the prettiest lady here." Gabriel held the ribbon, his eyes finding Eliza's across the small distance. The moment stretched, the noise of the fair fading to background. He crossed to her, and she was acutely aware of every watching eye, every whispered speculation. "For reviving the winter garden," he said softly, presenting it with a small bow. Eliza took it, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact was brief, entirely proper. But electricity shot through her, stealing her breath. His eyes darkened, and she knew he felt it too. Around them, the gossip intensified. She could hear it like the buzz of bees, invasive and inescapable. "Sinclair!" The voice cut through the moment like a blade. A tall, severe-looking man approached, clearly aristocracy, from his bearing and fine clothes. "Lord Pembroke," Gabriel said, his voice cooling. "I didn't realize you were in Yorkshire." "Lady Rothwell asked me to observe Lily's progress during my visit to the area." His eyes swept over their little group, lingering on Eliza with undisguised disapproval. "I must say, you seem to have created quite an unusual household arrangement." Gabriel stiffened. "Miss Thornton is an exemplary governess." "Oh, I'm sure she is." Lord Pembroke's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though one wonders if a governess should be quite so visible in ducal family affairs. People are beginning to talk. Sinclair, Lady Rothwell will be most interested to hear about this evening." The threat was clear. Gabriel's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Lily tugged his hand. "Papa, can we get chestnuts now?" The tension broke. Lord Pembroke bowed and moved away, but the damage was done. The remainder of the fare was shadowed, Gabriel's mood darkening, Eliza's anxiety mounting. They returned to the manor in near silence. Later, after Lily had been put to bed, still chattering happily about the fare, Eliza found herself once again in the family drawing room. It had become routine, these late evening conversations over tea, the house quiet around them, guards lowered in the gentle darkness. Gabriel entered, carrying the tea tray himself, having dismissed the servants. He poured for them both with careful precision, then settled into the chair beside her rather than across from her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for Lord Pembroke's rudeness." He wasn't entirely wrong. Eliza kept her eyes on her teacup. "The situation is unusual. People will talk. Let them talk. You say that now, but when Lady Rothwell arrives—" "Eliza." He set down his cup, turning to face her fully. "May I speak plainly?" Her heart hammered. "Of course, Your Grace." Arabella had a gift for joy. She made everything feel lighter, not just for me, but for everyone around her. When she died, the weight of the world settled on me, and I couldn't— He stopped, struggling with the words. "Couldn't what?" "Couldn't imagine ever feeling light again. I thought that weight was permanent, that I'd carry it until I died." He looked at her with such intensity she could barely breathe. "But lately, Your Grace, Arabella would have liked you," he continued, as though she hadn't spoken. "She would have approved of how you love Lily." The word love hung between them, heavy with meaning. "I do love her," Eliza whispered. "She's extraordinary." "Yes, she is. And you've given her something I couldn't, the warmth of maternal affection. You've brought light back into this house, into both our lives." The fire crackled. The distance between them felt charged, electric. Eliza knew she should leave, should flee to the safety of her room, but she was rooted to the spot. "I haven't felt this at peace in 3 years," Gabriel said softly. "Haven't felt this. I live, and I know I shouldn't say this. I know it's inappropriate, but, Eliza, I find myself—" The door opened. Mrs. Pemberton stood there, holding a letter, her expression apologetic but firm. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace, but this just arrived by special courier, from Lady Rothwell. She says it's urgent." The moment shattered like dropped glass. Gabriel took the letter, jaw tight. "Thank you, Mrs. Pemberton." After the housekeeper departed, Eliza stood quickly. "It's late. I should retire." "Eliza, wait!" But she was already moving toward the door, nearly running, unable to bear another moment of this exquisite torture. "Good night, Your Grace." She didn't wait for his response. In her room, Eliza sank onto her bed, the blue ribbon still clutched in her hand. Tears streamed down her face, hot and shameful and unstoppable. "This is exactly what Mother warned me about," she whispered to the empty room. "I've let myself love, and now I'll pay the price. He's a duke. I'm nothing. This cannot end well." But even as she said the words, even as she tried to rebuild her walls, she knew it was too late. She loved Gabriel Sinclair. She loved his daughter. She loved the life they'd built together, fragile and impossible as it was. And that love was going to destroy her. In his study, Gabriel sat motionless, Lady Rothwell's unopened letter on the desk before him. His eyes drifted to Arabella's portrait, that eternal smile, that captured joy. "Forgive me, Bella," he whispered. "I think I'm falling in love again, and I don't know if I have the courage to let it happen." The portrait offered no answers, only that unchanging expression of happiness frozen in paint and time. Gabriel opened the letter with unsteady hands. Lady Rothwell's elegant script announced her arrival in 1 week's time. She'd heard concerning reports about the household and intended to assess the situation personally. He set down the letter and pressed his palms against his eyes. 1 week until his carefully constructed world came crashing down. 1 week to decide whether duty or desire would win. 1 week to find courage he wasn't certain he possessed. Chapter 6. When Duty Calls. Gabriel stared at Lady Rothwell's letter until the elegant script blurred before his eyes. The words were civil enough on the surface, but their underlying message was unmistakable. "I shall arrive on Thursday to assess Lily's educational progress and the general household arrangements. I've heard disturbing rumors about inappropriate familiarity between Lily and her governess. I trust these are exaggerations. But given the delicacy of your position and Lily's future prospects, I felt immediate observation was warranted." Thursday, 3 days away. He set down the letter with a hand that wasn't entirely steady and moved to the window overlooking the winter garden. Even in the darkness, he could make out the restored beds, the cleared pathways, all the work Eliza and Lily had done together. The noose of social expectation was tightening around his throat, and he had no idea how to loosen it. Mr. Harrison arrived the following afternoon for their quarterly review of estate business. The solicitor was a precise man in his 50s who'd served Gabriel's father before him, and he conducted their affairs with methodical efficiency. It was only after the business concluded, over port in Gabriel's study, that Harrison cleared his throat with obvious discomfort. "There is, if I may, Your Grace, a delicate matter I feel obligated to mention." Gabriel's shoulders tensed. "Go on." "There's talk in society about you and the governess." Harrison spoke carefully as though navigating a minefield. "I'm sure it's nonsense, but Lady Rothwell has made inquiries through my firm, and there are whispers that you're neglecting your ducal duty to remarry appropriately." "Miss Thornton is an exemplary governess," Gabriel said, his voice harder than intended. "These rumors are malicious nonsense." "Of course, Your Grace, of course." Harrison took a measured sip of port. "But perception matters in your position. The Duke of Ashford cannot be seen to be—" involved with a woman of no standing. Your position requires a duchess who can manage your social obligations, navigate London society, represent your family with appropriate dignity. And Lady Lily needs a mother of appropriate rank, someone who can ensure her own eventual marriage to a suitable gentleman. Gabriel's hand tightened around his glass. I'm aware of my responsibilities. I don't doubt it, Your Grace. I only mention it because Lady Rothwell has been vocal in her concerns. She believes you're becoming inappropriately attached, that the household has developed an atmosphere that is, shall we say, too informal for a ducal residence. After Harrison departed, Gabriel remained in his study, staring at nothing. The solicitor's words echoed in his mind, joining Lady Rothwell's letter in a chorus of duty and expectation and social consequence. He was a duke. He had responsibilities, and his growing feelings for Eliza Thornton, feelings he could no longer deny, were a threat to everything his position demanded. Lady Rothwell arrived a day early. The carriage swept up the drive on Wednesday afternoon, catching them entirely unprepared. Gabriel was in his study. Eliza was teaching Lily mathematics in the schoolroom, and no one was positioned to greet the late Duchess's mother with appropriate ceremony. She swept into the house like an elegant storm, a woman in her 60s who had clearly been a great beauty in her youth, and still carried herself with regal bearing. Her silver hair was arranged in perfect coils, her traveling dress was the height of fashion, and her eyes, the same warm brown as Arabella's, were sharp as cut glass. Gabriel. She presented her cheek for his kiss, having intercepted him in the entrance hall. I hope my early arrival doesn't inconvenience you. Of course not, Lady Rothwell. You're always welcome. How gracious. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Where is my granddaughter? In the schoolroom with Miss Thornton. Shall I? But Lady Rothwell was already moving, following Mrs. Pemberton's directions with the confidence of someone who'd once been mistress of this house. Gabriel had no choice but to follow. They found Eliza and Lily bent over a slate, working through a mathematical problem together. At the sound of the door, Lily looked up, and her face transformed with joy. Grandmother! She flew from her chair and across the room, launching herself at Lady Rothwell with complete abandon. But it wasn't Lady Rothwell who received the embrace. Lily, in her excitement, had run to Eliza first, throwing her arms around the governess's waist. Mummy, grandmother's here. Can we show her the winter garden? The silence that followed was deafening. Eliza's face went white. Lily, this is your grandmother Rothwell, and you must call me Miss Thornton. But, Miss Thornton, Eliza repeated firmly, gently disentangling the child's arms. Lady Rothwell's expression revealed nothing, but Gabriel saw the flicker of something dangerous in her eyes. Lady Lily, come greet me properly. The child, confused by the sudden tension, moved to embrace her grandmother with considerably less enthusiasm than she'd shown Eliza. Tea was excruciating. Lady Rothwell maintained perfect civility, but her questions to Eliza carried subtle barbs that drew blood without leaving visible wounds. How quaint that you teach from imagination rather than established texts, Miss Thornton. I suppose modern ideas have their place, though one must be careful not to fill a duke's daughter with unsuitable notions. Eliza, maintaining her dignity admirably, responded with measured calm. I believe education should engage the mind and heart, Lady Rothwell. Heart is all well and good, but propriety and rank are what truly matter for a girl of Lily's station. She'll need to navigate the highest levels of society, make an advantageous marriage. These are not things one learns from imagination. Gabriel watched Eliza's fingers tighten around her teacup, saw the effort it cost her to keep her voice steady. I defer to your greater experience, Lady Rothwell. After tea, Lady Rothwell requested a private word in Gabriel's study. He followed with a sense of impending doom. "She's dangerously attached to that governess," Lady Rothwell said the moment the door closed. "And unless I'm mistaken, Gabriel, so are you. Eliza, Miss Thornton, has been wonderful for Lily. I don't doubt her competence, but Lily calls her Mummy. Did you hear that? Did you see how naturally it came to the child? The servants talk, Gabriel. They say it happens constantly. That Miss Thornton doesn't correct it. That you don't correct it." Gabriel said nothing. What could he say that wouldn't be a lie? "You cannot allow this to continue," Lady Rothwell pressed. "You're a duke. You have responsibilities. To your family, to your position, to Lily's future. Arabella would want you to remarry, yes, but to someone appropriate. Lady Ashworth would be a perfect choice. Wealthy, well-connected, experienced in society. I have no interest in Lady Ashworth. Then find someone else of appropriate rank. But this growing attachment to a governess is impossible. The scandal would be devastating. Think of Lily's future, her prospects for a good marriage. If society believes you've been carrying on with the governess, if there's even a whisper of impropriety, Lily will bear the stain of it. Doors will close to her. Advantageous matches will become impossible." Gabriel felt the walls closing in. "I understand." "Do you?" Lady Rothwell's voice was hard now. "Because I'm not certain you do. You're playing with fire, Gabrielle. And it's not just you who will burn. It's Lily, your innocent daughter, who's already lost her mother, who doesn't deserve to have her future destroyed because you couldn't maintain appropriate boundaries with the help. Eliza is not—" He stopped himself. "Eliza?" Lady Rothwell's eyebrows rose. "You use her Christian name?" Gabriel said nothing. "Distance yourself from this woman," Lady Rothwell said, her voice now ice, "before you do irreparable damage. Act like the Duke you are, not like some lovesick footman. Do it now, Gabriel, or I will." The following days were agony. Gabriel avoided Eliza as though she carried plague. He took his meals in his study, sent written notes about Lily's progress rather than discussing them in person, stopped walking through the winter garden, abandoned their evening conversations entirely. Eliza noticed immediately. How could she not? The warmth that had been building between them for months vanished overnight, replaced by icy formality that hurt more than any words could have. Mrs. Pemberton found her one afternoon in the empty schoolroom, staring out the window with unseeing eyes. "Don't take it personally, dear," the housekeeper said gently. "Lady Rothwell has been working on him, reminding him of his duties." "Of course." Eliza's voice was carefully neutral. "He's a duke. I'm a governess. There are natural boundaries. I should never have forgotten them." But alone in her room that night, she wept until she had no tears left. The summons came on the 5th day of Lady Rothwell's visit. "Miss Thornton, His Grace requests your presence in his study." Eliza's hands shook as she straightened her dress and made her way downstairs. Gabriel stood behind his desk, a deliberate choice, she realized, to maintain physical distance. His face was a mask of cold formality. "Miss Thornton, please, sit." She remained standing. "I prefer to stand, Your Grace." A muscle tightened in his jaw. "Very well. I'll be direct. It has come to my attention that certain informalities have developed in this household. Lady Lily has begun addressing you in a manner that is inappropriate. This must stop." The words struck like physical blows. I have never encouraged. Nevertheless, it has occurred. He cut her off, his voice like ice. Going forward, I require you to maintain strict professional boundaries. You are Lady Lily's governess, nothing more. Eliza's chin lifted, pride the only thing keeping her from shattering. I understand perfectly, Your Grace. Forgive me if I have overstepped my position. Tell her! A voice screamed in Gabriel's mind. Tell her you're protecting her, that the scandal would destroy her, that you're doing this because you love her. But the words wouldn't come. He stood frozen behind his desk, trapped by duty and fear and the weight of expectations he'd carried his entire life. If my services are no longer satisfactory, Eliza said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts, I can seek a position elsewhere. Panic flared in Gabriel's chest. That won't be necessary, provided you maintain appropriate distance. You have my word, Your Grace. Each word was coated in frost. I shall be nothing but professional. She turned and left, her spine straight, her dignity intact. Behind her, Gabriel sank into his chair and pressed his palms against his eyes. In the hallway, unseen, Lady Rothwell nodded with satisfaction. Eliza became a ghost in her own life, present, but not truly there, performing her duties with mechanical precision while feeling nothing at all. Lily sensed the change immediately. Why doesn't Mummy smile anymore? She asked Gabriel one evening, her voice small and confused. You must call her Miss Thornton, Lily. But why? Why can't I call her Mummy? Because it's not proper. But I don't want proper. Tears spilled down the child's face. I want my Mummy back. When Eliza tried to enforce the correction, you must call me Miss Thornton, darling. It's proper. Lily's anguish only increased. I'm not your mother, Lily. I'm your teacher. Lily ran away crying, and Gabriel, watching from the hallway, felt his heart break into pieces. The letter of resignation appeared on Gabriel's desk 3 days later, delivered by Mrs. Pemberton with obvious reluctance. She asked me to give you this, Your Grace. Gabriel unfolded it with unsteady hands. The writing was Eliza's, clear and elegant, but marred by what could only be tear stains. Your Grace, I hereby tender my resignation, effective at the end of the month. I believe it is in everyone's best interest that I seek employment elsewhere. Respectfully, Miss E. Thornton. She's upstairs packing, Mrs. Pemberton said quietly. She won't reconsider. I tried, Your Grace. She's set on leaving. Thank you, Mrs. Pemberton. After the housekeeper departed, Gabriel sat in the growing darkness, the letter in his hands, staring at nothing. He'd achieved what he thought he wanted. Appropriate distance. Protection from scandal. The preservation of his family's reputation. But the victory felt like ashes in his mouth. In her room, Eliza folded her few possessions with methodical care, each movement precise and controlled. She wouldn't cry anymore. She'd done enough of that. She'd survived her mother's death. She'd survived this. But she knew, with terrible certainty, that a part of her would remain in this house forever. In the nursery, Lily cried herself to sleep, clutching the blue ribbon from the Christmas fair, the one Gabriel had given Eliza, which Eliza had secretly left on the child's pillow as a goodbye gift. And in his study, Gabriel Sinclair sat alone in the darkness, wondering how doing the right thing could feel so entirely, devastatingly wrong. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point. 5 days had passed since Eliza submitted her resignations. 3 more remained until her departure. Ashford Manor felt like a tomb. The servants moved through the corridors with hushed voices and worried glances. Even the winter sunlight streaming through the windows seemed muted, as though the house itself mourned what was being lost. Gabriel threw himself into estate business with grim determination, reviewing accounts until his eyes burned, meeting with tenants, inspecting buildings that needed no inspection. Anything to avoid the hollow ache in his chest, the knowledge that he was destroying something precious through his own cowardice. Eliza maintained perfect professional distance. She taught Lily with competence but no warmth, moving through the lessons like an automaton. Her smiles were polite masks. Her voice was carefully modulated. And her eyes, once so alive with intelligence and affection, were now simply empty. But it was Lily who suffered most visibly. The child who had bloomed under Eliza's care began to wilt like a flower deprived of light. She refused most of her meals, pushing food around her plate with listless disinterest. She stopped playing, stopped chattering about her lessons, stopped asking to work in the winter garden. Instead, she sat silently in corners, clutching her worn doll, staring at nothing. "Lady Lily barely touched her luncheon again, Your Grace," Mrs. Pemberton reported, her voice tight with concern. "That's 4 days now. She's wasting away." Gabriel summoned the village doctor, who examined Lily thoroughly and found nothing physically wrong. "It's melancholy, Your Grace," Dr. Patterson said, snapping his medical bag closed. "The child is heartsick. I've seen it before in children who've suffered great loss. She believes she's being abandoned again." Lady Rothwell, still in residence and observing everything with sharp eyes, remained unmoved. "She'll adjust once a proper situation is established. Children are resilient. This is merely a phase." But watching his daughter fade, Gabriel began to break. The first night, Lily refused to sleep. Mrs. Pemberton sat with her, holding the child's small hand, while Lily stared at the ceiling with unseeing eyes. "Did I make Mummy angry?" Lily whispered finally. "Is that why she doesn't love me anymore?" Mrs. Pemberton's throat tightened. "Oh, sweet child, it's not your fault. The grown-ups are being very foolish. But she doesn't smile at me. She doesn't tell me stories. She's leaving. And it's because I did something wrong." "No, darling, no. You've done nothing wrong." But Lily didn't believe her. How could she, when all the evidence suggested otherwise? The second night, Gabriel found himself drawn to Lily's room long after she should have been sleeping. She wasn't screaming or crying. That would almost have been better. Instead, she wept quietly in her sleep, tears sliding down her cheeks, while small sobs shook her frame. He pulled a chair to her bedside and took her small hand in his larger one. In sleep, she gripped his fingers with desperate strength. Gabriel looked at his daughter, truly looked, and saw what his fear had created. This child had already lost her mother. Now she was losing the woman who'd filled that void, and she blamed herself for the loss. "Forgive me, little one," he whispered. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I'm only causing you pain." Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something that sounded like Mummy. Gabriel sat with her until dawn, watching her fitful rest, feeling something fundamental shift inside him. The third night, the breaking point, came at midnight. The scream tore through the house like a physical thing, raw and terrified and utterly heartbroken. Gabriel bolted from his study where he'd been staring blindly at papers, taking the stairs 3 at a time. From the opposite direction, he saw Eliza running from her quarters, still in her nightdress and wrapper, hair loose around her shoulders. They converged on Lily's room simultaneously. The child was thrashing in her bed, caught in the grip of nightmare, her screams dissolving into desperate sobs. "Mummy, don't leave me. Mummy, please, don't go away like Mama did." Eliza reached her first, gathering the hysterical child into her arms. "Shh, darling. I'm here. I'm here." But Lily was beyond comfort, beyond reason. She clung to Eliza with desperate strength, her small body shaking with the force of her sobs. "Don't leave me, Mummy. Please, don't leave me. I'll be good. I promise. I'll be so good. Please stay." "I'm here, sweetheart." Eliza's own composure shattered like glass, tears streaming down her face as she held the child tightly. "I'm here now. Promise, promise you won't leave." Eliza looked up then and saw Gabriel frozen in the doorway. Their eyes met across the room, raw, exposed, all pretense stripped away by the anguish of a child caught between them. Gabriel saw his daughter's desperate grief, saw Eliza's tears, saw what his fear and his adherence to duty had created, a child being destroyed by the loss of love she desperately needed. The epiphany crashed over him with the force of a physical blow. By trying to protect Lily from potential future pain, he was causing her real, immediate agony. By trying to honor duty and propriety and the expectations of his position, he was destroying the happiness all three of them could have. Eliza rocked Lily gently, whispering soothing words while the child's sobs gradually quieted. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here now. Shh, it's all right." "Don't go," Lily hiccuped at, her voice small and broken. "Please don't go. Shh, rest now, rest." Slowly, exhausted by her own anguish, Lily's grip loosened, her breathing deepened. She fell into fitful sleep, still clutching Eliza's nightdress. Eliza carefully laid her down, covering her with blankets, smoothing her damp hair with infinite tenderness. Then she stood and walked toward the door, intending to return to her own room. Gabriel stood in her path. She tried to move past him, but he caught her arm gently. "Please, we need to talk." Eliza's control, so carefully maintained for days, finally snapped. She whirled on him, her voice a harsh whisper to avoid waking Lily. "Talk? What more is there to say, Your Grace? You've made your position abundantly clear." "Eliza, please, don't." The word was sharp as broken glass. "Don't use my name. Don't pretend we're—" She couldn't finish. Gabriel followed her into the hallway, desperate now. "I was trying to protect you, to protect Lily. The scandal." "Protect us?" Eliza's laugh was bitter. "You made your daughter believe she's losing another mother. You made me—" She stopped, trembling. "Made you what?" "You made me love her." The words burst out, raw and agonized. "You made me love her, and then you sent me away." Her voice broke. "I vowed I would never do this. Never let myself care like this. My mother warned me. Never love a man whose world you cannot share. Never reach above your station. And I didn't listen. I let myself love that child as if she were my own. I let myself believe." She pressed her hands to her face, unable to continue. Gabriel stepped closer. "Believe what?" Eliza looked at him then, her face wet with tears, her eyes filled with anguish. "That I might belong here. That you might. But I was a fool. You're a duke. I'm nobody." This was always going to end exactly like this. You're not nobody. Gabriel's voice was rough with emotion. You're what? Eliza demanded. What am I to you? Your daughter's governess? A woman who serves a purpose until society tells you to put her back in her place. You're the woman I've fallen in love with. The words dropped between them like stones into still water, rippling outward into silence. Eliza stared at him, stunned into immobility. Gabriel's carefully constructed control shattered. The words came tumbling out, unstoppable now. I've been falling in love with you for weeks, watching you with Lily, talking with you in the evenings, seeing your intelligence and kindness and strength. And it terrified me. I thought, after Arabella, I thought I could never love again. I vowed I wouldn't. Because loving means you can lose, and I couldn't survive that pain again. Don't do this, Eliza whispered. I tried to push you away. I told myself it was duty, propriety, protecting Lily's future. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. From fear, from the possibility of loss. And in doing so, I've hurt the two people I love most in this world. You don't love me. Eliza shook her head, backing away. You can't. Gabriel followed, closing the distance between them. But I do. Heaven help me. I do. Then you're a fool. Eliza's voice broke entirely. Because I'm the schoolmaster's daughter who vowed never to love anyone, who spent her whole life building walls to protect her heart, and you've destroyed every one of them. She was crying now, openly. I love you, and I love Lily. And it's going to destroy me because this cannot be. Your world won't accept it. Lady Rothwell made that abundantly clear. Then we'll face that world together. You don't understand what you're asking. Eliza's voice was desperate now. The scandal will follow us everywhere. Your family, your peers, they'll never accept me. Lily will suffer for it. People will call her the governess's stepdaughter, treat her as tainted by association with someone so far beneath her station. Or they'll see that love matters more than rank, that happiness is worth fighting for. And if they don't, if the doors close, if Lily is excluded from society because her father married the help, Gabriel took both her hands in his. She didn't pull away, though she trembled like a bird. Then we'll make our own society, the three of us. And anyone who truly cares for us will accept our choice. You say that now, Eliza whispered. But in a year, 2 years, when the invitations stop coming, when other dukes won't associate with you, when Lily struggles to find a suitable match because of me, will you still feel the same? Yes. Gabriel's voice was absolute. Because a life of cold propriety without you is no life at all. These 3 years since Arabella died, I've been existing, not living. You've brought me back to life, Eliza. You've brought all of us back to life. They were inches apart now, the hallway dim around them, the house silent except for their ragged breathing. I'm so afraid, Eliza whispered. So am I. But I'm more afraid of losing you. Your Grace, Gabriel. His voice was soft but insistent. Please, just Gabriel. Gabriel. She tested his name on her lips, and something shifted in both of them. If I say yes to this, if I stay, there's no going back. For any of us. We'll be choosing a hard path. Then we'll walk it together. He reached up, gently touching her face. Eliza closed her eyes, leaning into his hand, as though it were the only solid thing in a tilting world. "I love you, Eliza Thornton. Will you give me the chance to prove it?" Eliza opened her eyes and looked directly at him. The fear was still there, would perhaps always be there, but alongside it was something else. Courage. The courage to choose love despite everything. Despite her mother's warnings. Despite the scandal. Despite the certain knowledge that the path ahead would be difficult. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, filled with 3 months of longing and fear and hope. Gabriel's arms came around her, holding her as though she were something precious and fragile and infinitely dear. When they finally parted, both were trembling. "Yes," Eliza whispered. "Yes." Down the hall, Mrs. Pemberton watched from the shadows, a smile on her weathered face. She quietly closed Lily's door, leaving the child to her peaceful sleep. Because somehow, even in her dreams, Lily knew everything was going to be all right. Chapter 8. The Choice That Changes Everything. Dawn broke over Ashford Manor, painting the winter landscape in shades of rose and gold. Gabriel stood at his study window watching the sun rise, having not slept at all. He'd spent the night in this room, alternating between pacing and sitting in motionless contemplation, working through what he knew he must do. Finally, as the first light touched the horizon, he turned to face Arabella's portrait. She smiled down at him eternally, captured in that moment of pure joy, forever young, forever lost. For 3 years, he'd avoided looking at this portrait for too long, afraid of what it would awaken in him. Now, he stepped close and spoke aloud to the painted image. "I loved you, Bella. I will always love you. You were my first love, and you gave me Lily, the greatest gift of my life." His voice was steady, certain. "But you're gone, my dear, and I'm still here. I'm still alive, and I've found someone who makes me feel alive again." The portrait didn't answer, of course, but in his mind, he could hear Arabella's voice, bright and certain, the way she'd always been. She would be laughing at him, he thought, laughing at how long it had taken him to see what was right in front of him. "You always said life was meant to be lived fully, with an open heart," he continued, touching the frame gently. "You wouldn't want me to bury myself in grief forever, would you?" And suddenly, he knew, with absolute certainty, that Arabella would want him to be happy, would want Lily to have a mother's love, would want the house to ring with laughter again, instead of echoing with silence. "I'm going to choose love again, Bella," he whispered. "Thank you for teaching me how." He didn't take down the portrait. She would always be part of their family story, part of who he was. But he could move forward now without guilt, without the crushing weight of feeling like he was betraying her memory. Love wasn't betrayal. It was the highest form of honoring what they'd shared. By the time Mrs. Pemberton brought his morning coffee, Gabriel had already sent for his solicitor. Mr. Harrison arrived at 9 o'clock, clearly puzzled by the urgent summons. "Your Grace, is there a crisis with the estate?" "No crisis. I need you to prepare several documents." Gabriel's voice was calm, decided. "First, a betrothal agreement. I'm going to marry Miss Thornton." Mr. Harrison's teacup froze halfway to his lips. "Your Grace, surely you're not serious." "The scandal? I'm quite serious. Draw up the papers." "But Your Grace, the social consequences. Lady Rothwell will be furious. The ton will—" "If society chooses to condemn me, So be it. Gabriel's voice was hard as iron. My title and lands are secure. I have enough influence to weather disapproval. What I cannot weather, what I will not weather, is a life without love. Mr. Harrison set down his cup with trembling hands. Lady Rothwell, I'll handle Lady Rothwell. You prepare the documents. I want this done properly and legally. Miss Thornton will be protected, regardless of what society thinks. After the solicitor departed, still sputtering protests, Gabriel allowed himself a small smile. The first battle was won. Now for the harder one. He found Lady Rothwell in the breakfast room, taking her morning tea with the particular elegance she brought to everything. She looked up as he entered, her expression cooling immediately. Gabriel, you're up early. Lady Rothwell, I need to speak with you. If this is about the governess's departure, I believe that matter is well in hand. I'm going to marry her. The words dropped into the room like stones. Lady Rothwell went very still. I beg your pardon? I'm going to marry Eliza Thornton. I wanted you to hear it from me directly. Lady Rothwell set down her teacup with exaggerated care. Gabriel, this is madness. Arabella would be happy that Lily has someone who loves her, and that I've found happiness again. I believe that with all my heart. The scandal will be enormous. Lady Rothwell stood, her composure cracking. You're a duke. You cannot marry a governess. The ton will crucify you. Lily's prospects will be destroyed. Have you thought about that? Have you considered what this will do to your daughter's future? I've thought of nothing else for days. Gabriel's voice was quiet, but absolute. And I've realized that Lily's future happiness matters more than her social standing. She needs a mother who loves her. She needs a home filled with warmth. And yes, some doors may close, but I'm prepared to face that. This is insanity. Perhaps, but I'm doing it regardless. And I hope in time you'll accept my choice, because I would like you to remain part of Lily's life. But if you cannot support this, I will understand, and you'll see considerably less of us. The threat was clear. Lady Rothwell could accept his decision or lose access to her granddaughter. She sank back into her chair, studying him with sharp eyes. She truly loves Lily, as much as any mother could. And you truly love her? More than I thought possible. Lady Rothwell was silent for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the table. Finally, she sighed, a sound of resignation mixed with something that might have been grudging respect. Arabella always said you were too proper, too bound by duty. She wanted you to be brave. A pause. She would have liked this, I think. Your governess. She has spine, at least, and heart. Does that mean? I don't approve, Lady Rothwell said firmly. I think you're making a terrible mistake. But I won't stand in your way. And I won't abandon Lily over this. Someone needs to help that child navigate society with a governess for a stepmother. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was acceptance. And right now, that was enough. Gabriel found Eliza in the schoolroom with Lily. The child was noticeably brighter this morning, sitting up straight, working through her mathematics with something approaching her old enthusiasm. She looked up as he entered, and her smile was tentative but real. Papa, look, I've solved the problem Miss Thornton set me. Excellent work, darling. He turned to Eliza, who was watching him with guarded hope in her eyes. Lady Lily, may I borrow Miss Thornton for a walk? Lily's eyes went wide. You're not angry anymore?" "I was never angry, little one. Only foolish. May I?" "Yes, Papa." The child's smile blazed now, brilliant as sunshine. Gabriel extended his hand to Eliza. She took it with trembling fingers, and they walked together through the house in silence. Down the stairs, through the corridors, out into the winter garden, where frost still glittered on the restored beds. The morning sun illuminated everything, the plants they'd saved together, the pathways they'd cleared. The evidence of love and care that had brought beauty back from neglect. Gabriel turned to face Eliza, taking both her hands in his. "I spoke with Lady Rothwell and my solicitor." His voice was steady despite the racing of his heart. If you'll have me, I'm asking you to marry me, properly, not because it's convenient, not just for Lily, but because I love you, because I want to build a life with you." "Gabriel, I still fear. I know, so do I. There will be scandal. Some doors will close. Society will gossip viciously." He squeezed her hands gently. "But other doors will open, doors to a life filled with love and genuine connection. And honestly, Eliza, I'd rather have one real friend than 100 false ones. I'd rather be happy with you than miserable with society's approval." "You're sure?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I've never been more sure of anything." Tears filled Eliza's eyes, but she was smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in days. "Then yes, I'll marry you." Gabriel pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were the answer to every question he'd ever asked. For the first time since Arabella's death, he felt complete. "Shall we tell Lily together?" They returned to the schoolroom hand in hand. Lily looked up from her work, her eyes going wide at the sight of them. Gabriel lifted his daughter onto his lap, Eliza kneeling beside them so they were all at eye level. "Lily, darling, how would you feel if Miss Thornton, if Eliza, stayed with us forever?" "Forever and ever?" The child's voice was breathless with hope. Eliza took Lily's small hand in hers. "Forever and ever. I'm going to marry your papa, and I'll be your mama. If that's all right with you." For a moment, Lily was absolutely still, as though afraid that moving might shatter the dream. Then her face transformed, pure joy radiating from every feature. "You'll really be my mummy? My real mummy?" "I'll really be your mummy." Lily threw her arms around Eliza first, then reached for Gabriel, pulling them all together into an embrace that felt like coming home. "I love you, Mummy. I love you, Papa." "We love you too, darling," Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face. "So very much." In the doorway, Mrs. Pemberton watched with glistening eyes, dabbing at them with her handkerchief. A family. Finally, blessedly complete. That evening, Gabriel sat at his desk, writing letters to his peers, formally announcing his engagement to Miss Eliza Thornton. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain or justify. He simply stated the facts with quiet dignity. Some responses, he knew, would be cold, others might be warm, but as he sealed each letter with his ducal crest, he felt lighter than he had in years. The weight he'd carried since Arabella's death had finally lifted. In her room, Eliza sat at her small writing desk, penning her own letter. "Dearest Sarah, you were right, dear friend. I was protecting my heart by deciding happiness was impossible. But it turns out, love is worth the risk. It's worth everything. I'm going to marry the Duke. Yes, there will be scandal. Yes, society will condemn us. But we'll face it together, Gabriel, Lily, and I. Wish me joy, Sarah, because for the first time in my life, I believe I deserve it. Your loving friend, Eliza. In the nursery, Lily slept peacefully, the blue ribbon from the Christmas fair tied around her doll's wrist. She dreamed of spring flowers in the winter garden, of laughter echoing through Ashford Manor's halls, of a family whole and happy, and hers. And in those dreams, two mothers smiled down at her, one in heaven, one soon to be bound by marriage vows, both loving her absolutely. The hard path still lay ahead, but they would walk it together, and that made all the difference. 3 months later, spring had transformed Yorkshire into a tapestry of green and gold, and on a bright April morning, the village church bells rang with particular joy. The church was full, though notably not with London aristocracy. The pews held villagers in their Sunday best, tenants from the estate who'd known Gabriel since childhood, household servants given the day off to celebrate. Sarah Hartley sat in the front row, beaming through happy tears. Mrs. Pemberton dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. And in the family pew, sitting with perfect posture and an expression of careful neutrality, was Lady Rothwell. She'd kept her word. She didn't entirely approve, that much was clear, but she was here, and that mattered more than Gabriel had expected. Several of Gabriel's true friends had traveled from their estates to attend, men who valued loyalty over society's approval. But the conspicuous absences spoke volumes. The Duke of Marlborough had sent regrets. Lord and Lady Pembridge had simply ignored the invitation. The scandal had taken its toll, just as they'd known it would. The organ began to play, and every head turned. Eliza walked down the aisle on the arm of the village schoolmaster who'd replaced her, a kind man who'd known her mother. She wore a simple dress of cream silk, elegant but not elaborate. She wasn't trying to be someone she wasn't. She was simply herself, a schoolmaster's daughter who'd somehow found herself about to become a duchess. Beside her walked Lily in a dress of pale blue, carrying a basket of spring flowers and radiating such pure joy that several guests found themselves smiling despite their tears. At the altar, Gabriel waited, and when he saw Eliza, his face transformed, all the cold formality that had defined him for 3 years melting away, replaced by wonder and love and gratitude. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, conducted by the village vicar who'd baptized Gabriel and later married him to Arabella. The old man's voice shook slightly as he spoke the traditional words, but his smile was genuine. "Gabriel Sinclair, Duke of Ashford, will you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I will." Gabriel's voice rang clear and certain through the church. "Eliza Thornton, will you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I will." Eliza was crying now, but they were tears of joy, the kind that come when something you'd believed impossible becomes gloriously, undeniably real. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Gabriel cupped Eliza's face in his hands and kissed her gently, thoroughly, while the church erupted in applause. "That's my mummy and papa," Lily shouted with pure delight, jumping up and down. Laughter rippled through the congregation, warm and genuine, and utterly without judgment. The wedding breakfast at Ashford Manor was modest by aristocratic standards, but rich in warmth. The dining room overflowed with guests, conversation flowing as freely as the wine. Sarah found Eliza near the windows, looking out at the spring gardens. "You look happy, my dear, truly happy." "I am." Eliza turned, smiling. "Terrified sometimes. There are still ladies who cut me in the village, invitations that don't come. But happy, Sarah, so happy. That's all that matters." Later, Lady Rothwell approached. Her expression was carefully composed, but something in her eyes had softened since that terrible confrontation 3 months ago. "Miss Thornton, forgive me, Your Grace. I must become accustomed to your new title." "Eliza is fine, Lady Rothwell. Duchess will do, but there was no sting in it. I won't pretend this is what I would have chosen for Gabriel. But you clearly love my granddaughter, and you've brought life back to my son-in-law's eyes. So, welcome to the family, Duchess." It wasn't warm, but it was genuine acceptance, and that was everything. "Thank you, Lady Rothwell." Eliza's voice was sincere. "I promise to honor Arabella's memory by loving her daughter as my own." Lady Rothwell studied her for a long moment. "See that you do," she said finally, but her hand briefly touched Eliza's arm, a gesture of connection, however tentative. As the afternoon waned, Gabriel and Eliza slipped away to the winter garden. It was in full bloom now, roses climbing the trellises, lavender scenting the air. Everything Arabella had planted, thriving once more. "Any regrets?" Gabriel asked, pulling Eliza close. "Not a single one. You? Only that I didn't have the courage to do this sooner." They kissed among the flowers, the spring sunshine warm on their faces, the future stretching before them, uncertain in its particulars but sure in its foundation. "Mummy! Papa!" They turned to see Lily racing toward them, her flower crown askew, her face flushed with excitement. "Come dance! Mrs. Pemberton says there's cake." She grabbed both their hands, pulling them back toward the house where music and laughter spilled from the open windows. As they walked, the three of them silhouetted against the spring sunshine, Eliza felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. My mother believed love was dangerous, a trap that would only lead to pain, she thought. And perhaps for her it was. But I've learned that the real danger isn't in loving. It's in being so afraid of pain that you never allow yourself to live. Yes, some doors have closed. Yes, we face disapproval from people who value rank over character. But we've gained something infinitely more precious. A family built on genuine love. A life lived with open hearts. Gabriel's thoughts ran parallel to hers. I vowed never to love again, believing it honored Arabella's memory. But I was wrong. The greatest way to honor someone you've loved is to keep your heart open, to let their legacy be love itself, continuing forward. Arabella taught me how to love. Eliza has taught me how to love again. And together, we're teaching Lily that love is always worth choosing, even when it's difficult. They reached the house where their guests were celebrating. Not the grand ton, but real people who truly cared for them. "Come on, Mummy! Come on, Papa!" Lily called, already racing ahead. Gabriel and Eliza followed hand in hand, a duke who chose love over duty, a teacher who chose courage over fear, and the child who brought them together. A family, imperfect but real, and that, they both knew, was more than enough. It was everything. And so, dear listeners, our story comes to a close. But perhaps yours is just beginning. If Gabriel and Eliza's journey touched your heart, if you found yourself hoping alongside them, crying with them, celebrating their courage to choose love despite the world's disapproval, then I have a small favor to ask. Please, take just a moment to press that like button It tells me that stories like this, stories of second chances, of walls crumbling, of love that conquers fear, are the ones you want to hear more of. Every like is a message that says, "Yes, Lyra, more of this, please." And if you're not yet part of our family here at Lyra's Romance Stories, click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because I have so many more tales to share with you, stories of dukes and governesses, of forbidden love and hard-won happiness, of characters who must choose between duty and desire, between safety and the terrifying beauty of opening their hearts. Tell me in the comments, would you have had the courage to stay, as Eliza did? Or would you have fled to protect your heart? Have you ever had to choose between what society expected and what your heart demanded? I read every single comment, and your stories, your thoughts, your reflections, they inspire the tales I tell. New stories arrive every day, historical romances filled with longing and tension, with characters who feel real enough to touch, with love that is earned through struggle and sacrifice and courage. So subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button if Gabriel and Eliza's story made you believe in love again. And share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to tear down walls, to risk your heart, to choose love even when it's the hardest thing in the world. Until next time, dear friends, remember, the greatest love stories aren't about perfect people in perfect circumstances. They're about imperfect people finding the courage to love anyway. I'm Lyra, and I'll see you in the next story.